Breaking right now, a major media scandal over sly news suggesting that Prince Andrew should shoot himself, as there is a growing storm engulfing the British royal family. Now, this is an incredibly interesting one for me because, yes, I have given very tough treatment of Prince Andrew for well over a decade. I was at the News of the World in 2011 when we first revealed the fact, before anyone even knew, that Prince Andrew had reconciled and was in New York with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, if it wasn't for the media pressure over Andrew, there's no doubt that the deep state would have covered up this entire story. Indeed, even today, we've seen once again the media revealing that Prince Andrew hasn't paid a penny in rent for 22 years, and he's now being described as the peppercorn prince because there's this crazy old-fashioned agreement where he doesn't have to pay any money to live in Royal Lodge, simply has to give up a peppercorn once a year. At the same time, I have also urged for there not to be total hysteria around this story, given we are talking about a man who has not been found guilty of any crime and has lost everything already. He has lost everything. Prince Andrew is now a figure who will go down in the history books as one of those awful footnotes, right? Queen Elizabeth II, greatest monarch of all time, had a really terrible second son who was caught up with one of the world's most infamous paedophiles, and he lost everything. Prince Andrew can't change that, but he poses no clear and present threat to the royal family as a result, unlike Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, who are actually trying to destroy it. But for me, and you know I'm a free speech absolutist, and by the way, I'm not calling for Sly News to be shut down, and I'm not calling for Nigel Cawthorne to be cancelled. But for me, they really crossed the line. Really crossed the line about the type of media world we want to live in, the type of society we want to live in, especially given everything that's gone on in recent weeks in regards to Charlie Kirk. Because what you're about to see is a guest on Sly News advocating for Prince Andrew to shoot himself dead as a response to this saga. And what you will also note is that the presenter of Sly News doesn't disagree for 1 second. Simply thanks the guest and moves on. Now, let me just stress again. If you think that a suicide is the way out of this debacle, you've got another thing coming. Why are we in this mess? Because of the apparent suicide of Jeffrey Epstein behind bars. Although if you believe that, you still probably believe in Santa Claus too. So watch this really shameful piece of broadcasting. I know many might disagree with me, might think that is the route to go down. But again, do we really want to live in a society where we now have the mainstream media advocating for someone to kill themselves? I don't think so. Watch.
Say, of course, that there's no imputation of guilt of Prince Andrew. The presumption of innocence is with him like everybody else. However, it's the royal family. He's an honourable man. He's an officer and a gentleman. Now, the traditional and honourable way out of a situation like this involves a tumbler of whiskey, a loaded revolver in the study.
Nigel Cawthorne, thank you so much for joining us this evening and giving us your thoughts on what is most likely to be a very difficult week for the King on his engagements and that shadow, the allegations of Prince Andrew continuing to cast log over the royal family. Thank you very much, Nigel Cawthorne.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's never the answer. It honestly isn't. It really isn't. And if any of you have dealt with suicide in your own life, in your own extended circles, you'll know why that broadcast was so deeply irresponsible on so many levels. And it's not what we should be advocating for. What we should be advocating for is for criminals like Jeffrey Epstein to face justice. And because of his suicide, that's why so many victims of this man have not been able to see justice. At the same time, it is undeniable that this is now a storm engulfing the entire royal family, as the respected royal author Tom Bower made clear on GB News.
One has the feeling there's panic in the palace, rudderless leadership. Everything is causing huge damage to the royal family and to Britain, and it was all predictable months, if not years ago, ever since the Newsnight interview, which of course shouldn't have happened. And the palace has just let it trundle on until the Daily Mail on Sunday released the emails and all the rest. And there's so much more terrible, incriminating stuff to come. And where's it all going to end? One just realizes that the king needs to take a firm hand. He's ill. He hasn't got good advisors. I think Prince William has been remiss in not stepping in and being more of an influence on his father. I think the cabinet secretary is invisible. The prime minister has done nothing. The great and the good, the wise men, the establishment of Britain is allowing the monarchy just to drift into an unbelievable quagmire.
Tom Bower's right. Do you think Maggie Thatcher would have allowed the royals to get themselves into this state? Do you think Tony Blair, and I'm no fan of the guy, would have allowed the royals to get into this state? Absolutely not. Because, of course, now there is a drumbeat in politics to strip Prince Andrew of his prince title as well, with reports overnight that there is cross-party support for an act of parliament to formally remove the disgraced royals' titles. The government says it doesn't want to get involved. But even Conservative Shadow Minister Robert Jenrick was prepared to speak out on the BBC today.
Life forever. Stop having any subsidy from the taxpayer whatsoever and go and lead an entirely private life. The public are sick of Prince Andrew and the damage that he's done to the reputation of our royal family and this country. What we should be worried about, though, as you rightly say, are the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, this appalling scandal, and they deserve answers and justice. And that involves Prince Andrew giving evidence, informing inquiries about what he knew and what his involvement was on. Yes, he should do that.
So you're saying, you would say that Prince Andrew should go to America and speak to the authorities?
Well, look, that's a decision for him and for the authorities in the United States. It's not for me to say. But what I do believe is that the victims of this terrible scandal deserve to have answers. And if Prince Andrew can contribute to that, then he should do.
And unfortunately, what we're doing, and this is the real risk if you're a monarchist and a royalist like me, is what we're currently doing is empowering the Republican movement. Look at that odd little bloke, Graham Smith, who posted, I was at Royal Lodge just now where Andrew is hiding. So he's stalking Andrew, okay? Talk of losing titles is nonsense. There needs to be police investigations and an inquiry into the royal cover-up. But I'm afraid that he's going to get a lot more coverage than he would have previously, given what else is going on. Watch.
This is Royal Lodge, where Andrew is holed up, trying to keep away from prying eyes of the world, whilst he is facing mounting accusations of criminality, obviously the sexual offences going back 25 years, and also now accusations of trying to corrupt a police officer, and accusations made in Andrew Lowney's book about misconduct in public office when he was trade envoy. Now, the debate raging at the moment in the media is all about whether or not he should lose his titles, which is quite frankly an offensive debate when he should be faced with criminal investigation. At the very least, the police should be not protecting him at the gates here, but instead arresting him, taking him to a police station and questioning him under caution. And given the mounting evidence, there should be a high likelihood of that leading to prosecution. That's not happening, and we're hearing stuff about, should he lose his Duke title, which he's not lost? Should he not be allowed to go to the coronation, which is clearly absurd as a punishment for sexual offences if he's guilty of those. So, we need to change the tune and change the debate, and the guy now hiding away in here needs to be taken down to the station, interviewed, and hopefully charged and facing serious consequences. And meanwhile, his brother and his nephew need to face consequences for the clear cover-up, the constant efforts to protect Andrew from scrutiny so that they can protect themselves from any kind of blowback. Because all of this has been about rich and powerful men protecting themselves by putting distance between other rich and powerful men who are accused of the most horrendous crimes. So it's time to get rid of this lot altogether, and to do that we need to start pushing for proper accountability for serious accusations of criminality.
To my superstar panel, Based and Bougie and Steph the Alter Nerd. Steph, firstly, can we just discuss Sly News now openly broadcasting people advocating for Prince Andrew to take his own life? I'm sorry, I believe a moral line has now been crossed. I have covered this story in detail and been incredibly harsh on Prince Andrew for many years. But it feels like we're losing any sense of civility here.
Yeah, and it's dangerous. It's setting a very, very dangerous narrative. And because people have heard it now on mainstream media, they think, oh, we're now allowed to say this as well, that Andrew should just go and end himself in this way. That's no good. Now, in terms of the host's reaction to it, I'm not going to condemn the host as such, because what that guest said was so outrageous, so egregious, so evil that in the face of that, I think the host was just stunned. I was like, what the hell do I say to that? All right, next. Thanks for your comments. Next on the show, blah, 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 right? But yeah, absolutely reprehensible. The person that said this should make a public statement and apologize. The most that we can say when it comes to Prince Andrew is that he should be questioned, and if there is any evidence that can lead to an arrest and a potential prosecution, then that's the route that it should go. Not the only justice that's worthy of anything from him is for him to end his life. No, he said, Dan, we're in this mess because Epstein ended his life, right?
But there just happens to be no CCTV footage of the cell, and, you know, the deep state investigations into what happened insist, oh, no, this was just incompetence. I'm sorry, I do not believe it. I do not believe it. And Base and Bougie, actually, one thing that people should be wanting to do probably is preserve Prince Andrew, because he is one of the only people in the world who may be able to cast some light on what actually went on with Epstein.
Exactly. This is what I've been saying. Instead of us trying to condemn him and demonize him, how about we use our brains and actually say, do you know what, this person was around Epstein, so maybe we should use this guy as a means of trying to investigate what happened to Epstein. Now, in regards to the comment that the person made in the BBC,
Nigel Hawthorne, yeah,
this is why Charlie Kirk was murdered. This is why,
Yes.
because the leftist media keeps inciting violence. They keep inciting violence, and then when someone passes away, they're either shocked or they're celebrating it. And I'm sick and tired of this. Now, as for Prince Andrew, yes, we should investigate him. Yes, we should look into what he's done. But him dying, what is that supposed to do? You know, this is a Christian country. So the first thing we should be preserving is life, even if someone has, done something wrong. We are all sinners by nature. Not only that, but we're always talking about the great replacement and, the demise of British values. I think a big plan or big part of trying to bring down British culture and British values is by trying to take down the royal family. This constant attack that we are seeing towards the royal family, whether it's through Harry and Meghan and attacking, Prince Andrew, is them also trying to take down British culture. Because one thing I, love about the the royal family, is the fact that in a world where everything is changing, the royal family is the one thing that has stayed the same. It's the one thing that has preserved itself. It's still very conservative. It's still very British. And we should be proud of that. We should preserve that. But in every corner of the media, they're just trying to destroy it and demise and, bring its demise. And I'm just sick and tired of it now.
Indeed. Absolutely. Very, very well put. And I just think we've all got to be clear and considerate. And of course, we have been covering this story and uncovering this scandal since 2011. And as Steph says, if there is criminal activity, Prince Andrew, of course, should be investigated, just like anyone else. But when we get to the point where commentators on television are openly advocating for him to go and take a revolver and shoot himself, I think we've jumped the shark on this. I really, really do. Breaking today. King Charles's health is at the centre of why he has been unable to properly handle the Prince Andrew scandal. The mainstream media will not report this. As loyal, outspoken viewers know, I have been prepared to sensitively go there. And I'm going to explain why again. Because yes, King Charles is an individual who deserves respect, but as the monarch, as the head of state, there is huge significance in terms of the state of his health. And the reality is that there is a growing feeling within the British royal family that King Charles is indeed dying, and that is why power is shifting to Prince William. That is why Charles's appearances are becoming few and far between, and he is looking unwell. And of course, I have so much sympathy for him in regards to this, especially given he was struck by this terminal cancer so soon after taking the throne. Of course, there is almost a Shakespearean tragedy-like storyline to the life of Charles. But at the same time, we do have to be realistic in terms of what this means for the British royal family and the decisions that a King William V is going to make, both in terms of Andrew and in terms of Harry and Meghan. Now, I'm going to give you some context to all of this. I think it's important, and I do want to do it sensitively. First, this is what Lady Colin Campbell revealed here on Outspoken.
The King is not in any position health-wise to add to any stress and burdens that he already has. I mean, his cancer is not curable, or is certainly, let me rephrase that, for public consumption. It is not yet cured, and there is no great prognosis that it will ever be cured. So he is having to live with treatment.
Now, what this means, of course, is that the power within the British royal family has shifted towards Prince William. And Tom Sykes of the Royalist Substack, who has been thrust out of the International Royal Rota because of his decision to report on the King's health, does have some stark words about exactly what is going on. He reports readers of the Royalist, unlike those of the craven British newspapers, will be aware of the central fact informing and underpinning this entire story, that King Charles III is dying. Now, Tom Sykes appeared on Substack, and I do want to show you some of this because it's important that you see this in the full context, because he paints a picture of that reality being why Buckingham Palace has not been able to properly cope with the Prince Andrew situation. Watch.
It's a very powerful indication of the chaos which the King's office is in. Partly, as I have repeatedly said, and as you won't read in any of the UK newspapers, this is all about the fact that King Charles is seriously ill and is not expected to live very long. And you can tell that by looking at the photographs, by looking at his schedule, like how quickly and briefly he attends many events, by the fact that he has to go for these very long rest periods. He's in Balmoral at the moment, these very long rest periods before doing any major event. Like, he has to go to the Vatican on Wednesday, and he's going to be the first leader of the Church of England to pray with the head of the Catholic Church. So it's very obvious to anybody watching that the King is really ill. And as I've also said repeatedly, I think he's been amazing. I think he's been incredibly courageous, incredibly brave, all the wonderful adjectives of praise that you could throw at Andrew. The example, and I think it's, you know, anyone who we've all had friends or family who've struggled with cancer, and we know, you know, how inspiring it is when people are amazing about it. But I also fundamentally, it was a massive mistake to announce that he. It was a massive mistake to announce that he had cancer. It's completely weakened him. The Queen did not tell anyone, did not even tell her own family that she was dying. She had bone cancer at the end of her life, the last couple of years of her life, which is very, very painful. You know, I was told she couldn't see very much. She certainly couldn't move around. She spent a lot of her time in bed. But she clung to the fiction that she was immortal because she knew how important it was. She knew how destabilizing it would be if she effectively did what Charles has done and pre-announced her own death, because it fires the gun. It fires the gun on the succession. And that is what this is all about. Make no mistake.
So I guess what Tom Sykes is saying is there's been a cost to the transparency, the early transparency that King Charles had about his cancer battle. He explains how that eventuated.
And Anna's saying it's good that he announced he had cancer, but yep, I want to point something out, right? He didn't mean to announce. Initially, that was not the plan, to announce that he had cancer. Initially, what happened was he was diagnosed with a benign prostate condition. And he decided that it would be a good idea to say that he was having treatment for a benign prostate condition, for the very admirable reason that it would encourage other men to do it. It would destigmatize the condition, you know, all of those things we hear about. But also, I'm afraid, because Charles has always been aware of his own PR, right? And he realized this was a good way to do a good thing and also portray himself as a modern, accessible guy. This was going to be a very different kind of monarchy to the Queen, who was obsessively secret about her health, etc., etc. But then, when he went in for the benign prostate treatment, they found the cancer while they were doing that. And by that stage, it was too difficult then to cover it up or hide it, or not cover it up, but keep it quiet. It was too hard to keep it quiet because too many people knew, and everybody was asking, how did the surgery go? So they would have been forced into a direct lie, and you know, direct lies that are not unknown in royal communications, but too many people knew. Like, if they hadn't said in the first place that he was going for the benign prostate treatment, which I think was a form of water ablation, which is quite a common treatment for guys as they get a bit older. If they hadn't said he was going for that, and they'd done that procedure, and then they'd found the cancer, and then they'd been able to figure out what it was for 6 or 7 weeks, whilst keeping him private and saying that maybe, you know, he wasn't feeling well or what have you, they might have been able to contain it a bit more. So,
but because of that announcement, there has now been what Tom Sykes reports is a shift of power.
So the power starts to drift away. And that's why Charles's office is being managed so badly, why it's so chaotic, why the messaging is such a mess, why on Wednesday we were being told, oh, there's no point stripping him of the Duke title, he'll still be a prince. And on Friday, suddenly the King's acted decisively and stripped him of his Duke title. Now he's still just a prince, which is like nothing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so the whole thing is it's really very hard to understand everything that's going on in the royal story at the moment if you read the new UK newspapers, which basically talk about Charles's illness as if he has, you know, a nasty cold, or he's a guest at a dinner party who cannot be, you know, who cannot be offended or something like that. So I think, well, what all those people do, someone's saying, I can't imagine what all those people actually do, 1,000. I mean, that is a good point, but it is, the point is, it is a huge operation. It's a huge operation. And, you know, people want to be on people want to be on the right side of the coin. They want to be allied with the right person.
Rob Shooter has also sort of gone there in his most recent reporting, writing, King Charles's brave battle as Prince William protects the crown. The walls of Buckingham Palace are whispering with concern, not scandal, as King Charles III faces the greatest battle of his reign, a serious, closely guarded illness that has left even his fiercest critics full of admiration for his courage. Royal insiders tell Shooter Scoop the 76-year-old monarch is seriously unwell but determined to carry on, refusing to relinquish his duties despite growing fatigue. He's exhausted, but he won't stop, says one longtime aide. Every morning he insists on reading his red boxes. He believes his service to the country is his calling, and he'll keep going as long as he can. Behind the scenes, Prince William has taken on more responsibility. Even the decision to strip Prince Andrew of the Duke of York title was a joint act of resolve, father and son united to protect the institution. So, to my superstar panel, Based and Bougie, and Steph, the Alter Nerd. So, Steph, of course, on one of your channels, you cover the royal family. Where do you stand on this? Because obviously reporting on someone's health is difficult. My view is that because he's the monarch, it's certainly historic. It's not something that we can ignore. And at the same time, given the Prince Andrew scandal, it really does provide some type of insight into why so much of this power is moving to Prince William.
Okay, so I don't really report on the King's health unless it is confirmed from the palace itself. I don't really discuss it much or touch upon it much because, yes, he's the king, and I see your point that you're making there, Dan. However, he's still a human being, and we're talking about private medical information, and everyone has a right to their privacy when it comes to their medical information, whether that be the king, whether it be Hazard, Megsy, Princess Catherine, anyone. Now, in terms of that clip that you played from Tom Sykes, Tom Sykes really pissed me off. It wasn't a massive...
Go on.
Right. Here we go. All right. Oh my goodness. Here we go. Tom, it wasn't a massive freaking mistake for the king to announce that he had cancer. Are you shitting me, mate? If he didn't announce that he had cancer, right? I'm telling you this right now. We would have had a Where's Kate Part 2, and you would have been involved in that as well, alongside Lucy Boozy, the Sussex Squad, idiots and morons, and the rest of them. You'd be like, where's the king? Why haven't we seen him in a while? Then there'd be comments about his appearance, etc., when he would come out in public. So by being transparent, all that BS has actually been avoided. Now, how bad is his cancer now? Do you know what? It's none of my damn business. We know, right, that King Charles, to coin a little bit of a phrase from you, Dan, has a superstar royal panel to help him on his duties. You've got the likes of Prince William, Princess Anne, Duchess Sophie, Prince Edward, etc. So, for example, with the Prince Andrew situation that you're referencing, reports are coming through that Prince William really was the main architect and the force behind getting Andrew's titles effectively removed. So, with that kind of superstar royal panel backup that the king's got, I'm not worried at all with the king and his capacity to undertake his duties. He's actually following, as far as I'm concerned, his mother's footsteps to undertake his duty as king to his country and us for as long as possible. And that, to me, needs to be applauded.
Absolutely. And I do applaud that. And it was heartbreaking to see him looking the way he did yesterday. But I guess the difference with the late Queen and Prince Philip is that people like me who were reporting on the royal family at the time knew that they were suffering from cancer. I mean, certainly the late Queen in her last couple of years had very, very serious cancer, but she chose not to announce it. So while I completely agree with you, I think Charles's transparency should be applauded. I think it's sort of unrealistic to think that people are not going to see for themselves what's happening. And it's an interesting one, isn't it, Based in Bougie? I mean, I do agree that, of course, this is up to him what he chooses to reveal. However, when it comes to the Pope, for example, in Vatican City, or the President of the United States in the US, because they are such important figures and, of course, heads of state, they do have actual medical transparency, right? Where their health records are provided in some way, obviously not all of the intimate details to the public. So I don't know. It's an interesting debate, but I think certainly where it has become very relevant in this story based in Bougie is that it's William who's now calling the shots, right? And it's William who demanded that action was taken on Prince Andrew. It's William who wants to see, I guess, the king go one step further. You know, he doesn't think it should be Prince Andrew at all. He certainly doesn't think there should be Prince Harry or Prince Archie or Duchess Meghan and Duchess Lily. I mean, William is all about protecting the future of the British monarchy, and I think he's going to take a much tougher stance. But I guess that's relevant based in Bougie, because, you know, if he was not going to accede to the throne for another 20 years, then maybe it would be less relevant. Do you see the point that I'm making?
Yeah, I mean, he is the heir to the throne, so of course he's going to take quite a harsh stance, and he's going to be the one that's going to try to move the decisions around. But I guess ultimately, whether King Charles, you know, let the public know about his health, his health issues or not, I think the main thing we need to remember is that the royal family, they're still human beings. You know, I think people actually forget that they're still human beings. They should have a right to be private, or they should have the right to be public. Now, in this case, I think that King Charles definitely should have been public about his health issues, and we should be applauding him for that. Because look what happened with Kate when she wasn't public. There was so many rumors swirling around about her disappearing, people even saying that she was secretly dead. And it just causes so much stress to the actual institution of the royal family. So ultimately, my personal opinion on this is that I think we should just remember that the royal family are human beings, and that we shouldn't, you know, pressurize them on when they shouldn't inform us on their, you know, medical issues.
Steph, would you like to see King Charles go further on Prince Andrew, or do you feel that the statement released on Friday night was enough? Because there's certainly a sense of growing, I guess, political outrage in the United Kingdom that Andrew has effectively been allowed to do what Harry and Meghan were allowed to do, right? Which is just say, oh, don't worry about us. You know, we're not going to use these titles. We're not going to use our HRS status when, of course, we know in Harry and Meghan's case, they have been.
So my understanding is the difference with Hazza, Megxi and the Prince Andrew situation is that with Prince Andrew, it's been put in pretty much abeyance. So it's this like legal agreement that Prince Andrew has got with the royal family where he's not able to use the titles again. They didn't do that with Hazza and Megxi. So that's the first thing. In answer to your other question, should they go further? Well, that's a difficult one to answer, really, in a way, because he has put the royal family into disrepute. And the main thing that members of the royal family have to do is to protect the monarch, protect the crown at all costs, which is what Prince Andrew hasn't done. So he does need to fall on his sword in order to protect the crown. At the same time, as you said earlier on, he's not being found guilty of anything, but he's lost everything. But the evidence out there doesn't look good, so you can understand why he's losing everything all at the same time. Just his association with Epstein alone, bloody hell, I can understand why he's lost everything just on that. Then you look at all the emails that are coming out and more information coming out about how he's lied about his relationship with Epstein and the girls, this, that, and the other. And so I suppose coming around to that way of thinking, you know what? Let's put it this way. If an Act of Parliament came through to remove Andrew's Prince title, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. If the royal family remove him from the royal website, again, I'm not going to lose much sleep on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Rafe Hadelman-Koo, who's a brilliant guy, you know, historian, broadcaster, excellent on royal matters, certainly a supporter of King Charles. And he's been pointing out some facts, just some clear facts around this. And based in Bougie, he just makes the point that Prince Andrew has not been formally stripped of his titles. Legally, he remains His Royal Highness, the Prince of Andrew, Duke of York, Earl of Inverness, Baron Killalea. So only Parliament can take action here.
Well, I think personally, I think they should look into his association with Epstein. Why not? Honestly, the whole world is talking about Epstein. And, obviously with Trump as well trying to shut down the case, that was suspicious. So I feel as though Andrew is the one guy that could actually give us the truth. So if they give us some kind of investigation for that, then why the hell not? And then from there, we will find out whether he was guilty or not guilty. But one thing I've realized about the media is that once the media has branded you as guilty, you're guilty for life. So I
That's the
feel like,
thing.
yeah, once they've branded you as guilty, whether the Sun, the BBC, you're guilty. So I just think whether they go into the investigation or not, his brand will always just be
100%.
guilty.
And that's the
But
thing.
the only way,
And I just try and be fair on this, right? I try and be fair on this because what you're saying matters. Yeah, I've reported a lot of stuff on Prince Andrew myself over the years. So it's not that I don't believe that he should absolutely be susceptible to full scrutiny, but we do live in a country where one of our fundamental beliefs is innocent until proven guilty. He has not been proven guilty of anything. He did want to fight Virginia Giuffre in court, and he was asked not to, and the royal establishment came down on him like a ton of bricks because, of course, it would have overshadowed his mother's platinum jubilee. So it's a difficult one. It is a difficult one, but I think we've had an honest discussion about it here without hysteria, and that's important to me. Thank you so much to my two rising stars of YouTube and new media, Based and Bougie. You've got to subscribe to her channel, and Steph, the Ultra Nerd, who covers the royal family, actually, as well as British politics and many other things. You're both brilliant. Love having you on Outspoken. Thank you, Steph, and Based and Bougie. We're going to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass in just a moment. Remember, Prince Andrew is nominated. But to your feedback now, Pixie Sterling says, every time I see Sadiq Khan refusing to answer Susan Hall, my blood pressure rises, and the fact he refers to her as she, I need medication. Jaina K5V says, I used to be an Anglophile, but you could not pay me to live in the United Kingdom now. Luke Jones says, if the England football team won a trophy, you would still see Palestine flags on the streets of England. What would Gary Neville think of that? He'd probably be happy, wouldn't he? He would probably be happy. And Solarian Unlimited, speaking of Piers Morgan, says, never forget this pompous twat was very unpleasant to those who refused the jibby-jabby, to the point of refusing hospital treatment for those who didn't take the free liquid gift. Anglo-Saxon 666 says he's desperate to be back in the so-called mainstream. And Paul, on this revolting comment, I think, from a guest on Sly News advocating for Prince Andrew to shoot himself, says Sky News definitely crossed a line with that comment about Prince Andrew. So great feedback from you today. But let's reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass now. A reminder of your nominees of the worst Britain in the world today. George Aberoni, nominated by Darren Donaldson, the incoming president of the Oxford Union, who has finally lost that confidence motion. He's out, folks. Great news. Zach Polanski, nominated by Dr. Wolf, because he leads the Green Party, acting as a Trojan horse for Islam. And Prince Andrew, nominated by the Chris of Cornwall, for being a complete shameful embarrassment to the British people and the monarchy. Okay, your results are in. In third position, George Aberoni with 22% of the vote. The runner-up with 33% of the vote, the Green leader, Zach Polanski. But following in the footsteps of his ex-wife yesterday, today's Union jackass with 45% of your vote, Prince Andrew. And today's greatest Briton is Graham Linehan, nominated by the real Mick Cass, because the Met Police have dropped their investigation into his social media posts, concluding that they will no longer investigate non-crime hate incidents. Good luck to him in suing them for wrongful arrest and false imprisonment. Okay, we're moving over to Substack now to continue the conversation in the Royal Uncancelled After Show. Buckingham Palace doubles down by revealing Prince Harry and Meghan Markle remain a bigger threat to the monarchy than Andrew, Windsor and Sarah Ferguson, as plans are drawn up to deal with the Sussexes once and for all. So we're going to reveal the results of our bombshell outspoken poll over on Substack with our Royal Masterman Angel 11. Please sign up www.outspoken.live. So at this stage, we're moving off YouTube. We're heading over to Substack, www.outspoken.live. But I will be back with you tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you.
For weeks, tension had been building behind the closed doors of the royal palaces. The king's troubled brother, long shrouded in scandal, found himself isolated once again as the walls of royal patience finally began to close in. Despite the monarch's return from the Scottish Highlands for official duties in London, there were no private meetings between the two men. The king carried on with his diary, meeting political leaders and foreign dignitaries, while the Duke of York remained confined to his Windsor home waiting, according to some sources, for the inevitable call that would end his public life for good. The Duke, aged around 65, had already been under renewed pressure following the latest wave of revelations surrounding his friendship with the late financier and convicted offender Jeffrey Epstein. In the same week, his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson was due to mark her 66th birthday with a cheerful gathering at their Windsor residence, Royal Lodge. The party had been meticulously planned, complete with family, friends and estate staff who had worked for days preparing for the celebration. Even her sister, Jane, had flown from her home in Australia to be by her side. Yet only hours before the guests were set to arrive, the Duke abruptly called everything off. Staff, who had been laying out decorations and refreshments, were told to stand down. The sudden cancellation, insiders say, was not out of consideration for modesty, but out of necessity. By that time, the scandal had grown too loud to ignore. Earlier that very day, a national tabloid had published damning new claims from Virginia Giuffre, the woman who accused the Duke of sexual abuse while she was trafficked by Epstein. The fresh details, extracted from her forthcoming memoir, cast a renewed spotlight on the royal who had long insisted upon his innocence. Behind palace walls, aides described the mood as grim. One senior courtier admitted privately that it felt like the endgame. Discussions among senior royals, including the Prince of Wales, grew more urgent as the public's outrage reignited. The turning point, several insiders suggested, came when emails surfaced in which the Duke appeared to reaffirm his closeness to Epstein, even after claiming publicly that he had severed ties with the disgraced American financier. In one message, he allegedly wrote that they were in this together, sent months after he had told the public that their friendship was over. That revelation, combined with Miss Giuffre's memoir and the fear of further correspondence emerging, created what courtiers described as the tipping point. For years, the institution had tolerated embarrassment. This time, the damage was too deep, the risk too great. Inside the palace, a sense of weary determination began to take hold. The king, known for his aversion to confrontation, nevertheless faced pressure from advisers to act decisively. The Prince of Wales, according to sources, had privately expressed fury after the Duke's recent behaviour at the funeral of the Duchess of Kent, where he was seen attempting to position himself close to the Prince and Princess of Wales. Those present described the moment as deeply inappropriate, and said William found it distracting from what was meant to be a solemn occasion. Meanwhile, royal aides were preparing for impact. They knew that Miss Giuffre's memoir, due for release within the month, would reignite scrutiny of the family. When early excerpts were leaked, claiming the Duke saw sex with her as a birthright, alarm bells rang across royal offices. The Queen's previous action, stripping her favourite son of his military titles in the early months of the year 2022, had once seemed like the end of the matter. But now the monarchy faced a renewed storm, and this time the king could not stand aside. Throughout the week, Proposals were floated in hushed meetings, removing the Duke from the line of succession, cutting him off financially, even sending him abroad to live quietly out of sight. Some aides warned that the window for a voluntary exit was closing quickly. Complicating matters further were recent reports linking the Duke to a Chinese intelligence scandal. It had emerged that he met senior Beijing official Kai Chi on at least 3 occasions between the years 2018 and 2019, sparking fears he might have been unwittingly drawn into questionable exchanges of information. For number 10 Downing Street, this was the final straw. Officials quietly conveyed their expectation that the palace should deal with the situation. On the surface, the royal family carried on as normal. The Prince and Princess of Wales appeared in high spirits during a visit to Northern Ireland. The King's public schedule remained full, including a meeting with opposition leader Sir Keir Starmer and a visit to the Australian High Commission. Yet behind the polished facade, aides were preparing for one of the most consequential decisions of the monarch's reign so far. When the call finally came, it was brief and to the point. Late on a Friday afternoon, the King spoke by telephone to his brother, who was at Royal Lodge in Windsor. There was no royal summons, no face-to-face confrontation. The two men were said to be nearly 500 miles apart, a fitting metaphor for how far their relationship had drifted. By the early evening, word had reached journalists that the Duke had agreed to relinquish his titles. Around an hour later, a formal statement was issued from Buckingham Palace, marking the first official communication concerning the Duke since his disastrous television interview in the year 2019. The statement, barely over 100 words, declared that the Duke was taking a step further beyond his previous withdrawal from public duties. While it was framed as voluntary, Palace insiders made clear that it was the outcome of sustained internal pressure. Observers were taken aback by the Duke's tone, which remained defiant. He insisted he had always placed duty to family and country above all else and continued to deny the allegations against him. Some within the palace viewed his words as tone-deaf, suggesting he had not fully grasped the gravity of his situation. As the dust settled, the consequences became clearer. Removing the Duke of York title would not only diminish his standing, but could also affect his daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, who had maintained close ties with their father. The King, according to insiders, was adamant that any action should avoid harming the princesses for whom he holds deep affection. Officials explored legal and constitutional avenues to make the change permanent. One proposal suggested that if a mechanism could be found to revoke titles and honours without resorting to parliamentary legislation, it would be preferable. Otherwise, a formal Act of Parliament might be required, an outcome the palace was keen to avoid. Meanwhile, the atmosphere at Royal Lodge grew sombre. Friends of the Duchess of York described her as devastated by the cancelled birthday party, which she had hoped would bring some much-needed cheer after months of tension. Her sister Jane remained at the residence to offer emotional support, yet by the weekend the grand mansion felt unusually silent, its gates closed to visitors. For the Duke, this marked not only the loss of a title, but the symbolic end of royal rehabilitation. Those close to him admitted he had been clinging to the hope that time would soften public opinion. Instead, the opposite had occurred. The release of Miss Giuffre's memoir, her tragic death by suicide earlier in the year, and the exposure of more compromising details had sealed his fate. Within days, political voices joined the fray. Labour Member of Parliament Rachel Maskell urged both the monarch and the government to formalise the removal of the Duke's titles through new legislation. She cited proposed laws that would allow the King, or a special parliamentary committee, to strip honours and peerages in cases deemed harmful to the Crown's reputation. At Buckingham Palace, aides refused to comment publicly, but privately expressed relief that a decisive step had finally been taken. Many had grown exasperated after years of managing the fallout from the Epstein affair, which had effectively forced the Duke to step back from public duties in the final months of 2019. For the monarchy, the move represents both closure and caution. The king, according to those familiar with his thinking, wished to deliver a clear message that the institution would no longer shield members who brought disgrace upon it, regardless of personal affection. Yet he also sought to avoid unnecessary spectacle, hence the quiet phone call rather than a formal royal audience. By the end of the week, the Duke remained secluded at Royal Lodge, facing growing calls to vacate the property entirely. Courtiers discussed whether he might be offered a settlement to relocate abroad, possibly to a private estate beyond the United Kingdom. No final decision had been made, but insiders suggested that patience for his continued residence on royal grounds was wearing thin. For many within the palace, the episode has underscored the fragility of public trust. The monarchy, already navigating a changing political landscape and scrutiny over privilege, could ill afford further scandal. The king's firm yet understated action was viewed as an attempt to draw a line under years of humiliation, though few believe the story has reached its final chapter. The Duke's statement, however brief, hinted that he might not retreat quietly. By reaffirming his denial and invoking his sense of duty, he appeared unwilling to accept full responsibility. Whether this signals future defiance or mere desperation remains to be seen. As night fell over Windsor, the once grand Royal Lodge stood as a symbol of faded privilege and unfulfilled redemption. For the Duke of York, the chapter that began with friendship in high society and ended in scandal across continents has now reached its bleak conclusion. The party, in every sense, is truly over.